Well, good afternoon, class. This is Dr. Green. I wanted to give you what I'm calling some research project notes. If you've looked at the announcement, you will know that this video is now being made available for you. I want to do a couple of things here with this brief video. I want to basically explain the basics of the social science models that I have provided for you as you are preparing to do your research projects. You've seen this, no doubt. I'll say it again. Y, that is to say the dependent variable, is a function of some set of independent variables. We call them x1, x2, x3, and the like. We also refer to y as a dependent variable that we want to predict. We want to use our x variables, on the other hand, to hypothesize and attempt to explain the changes that we anticipate we'll find in a y variable. I've also specified the notion of E, or an error term. It turns out that any model, statistically structured, is likely to have some problems in predicting exactly the relationship between your dependent and independent variables. In statistics, you have something that's called an R-square, or a coefficient of determination. In a perfect world, the model would be able to predict changes precisely, so that you'd have a number like 1 as opposed to a number like 0. 1 means perfect ability to predict or explain. 0 would mean no ability in the model. A lot of models, particularly in the social science arena, particularly in the kind of research that you do in the social science area, like criminal justice, might have predictive capabilities in the range of anywhere from 0.1 to as high as 0.5. So, which basically means 30% up to 50% of the change in a y variable that you're trying to understand can be explained by the x variables that are found in the model. Okay. All right. Now, let's take a look at the textbook, shall we? Pages 16 and 17 of the Hagen text really gives you some of the language that I have been describing in the emails I have sent to you. Page 16 talks about terms like operationalization, talks about variables, dependent and independent variables, theories, and hypotheses. Read through that again. I think that will help you to have a better sense of what I'm intending to try to communicate to you in the emails. On page 17, you have a list of variables that are described in the model, in that particular example in Hagen. You also have further down on the page something called an x variable, or an independent predictive variable. You also have a dependent, or an outcome variable. So that language is found in the textbook, pages 16 and 17. I think for now, as you read through those, I think you will get at least a better sense of what I'm trying to communicate. Okay? Now, I also have a couple of research examples that I have posted. Those can be found at the bottom of the page under the syllabus. If you click on syllabus and scroll down, you would find these two particular studies that I'm calling research examples. Okay? The first study, willingness to pay for public services. If you'd get that particular study, take a look at it and turn to pages 402 and 403. You will see a model that attempts to predict the citizens' willingness to pay for public safety as a function of two variables, two large type variables, or predictive variables. One is called attitudes and one is called experience. So on page 403, what you will see is this model. And if you think about the model in the way that we have described on pages 16 and 17 of Hagen, you'd start with willingness to pay as the y variable, or the variable that you're attempting to understand, or the outcome variable, as you see on page 17. So think about willingness to pay as what you're after. If you look at figure 1 again on page 403, you move one column over, one line over, you'll see attitudes. Under attitudes, you have 4 variables. These are, again, what we call predictive variables. On page 17 of Hagen, you see the reference to those predictive variables. Citizens' trust, character assessments, service quality, service importance, again on page 403 of the research study on willingness to pay. You see those. Under experience, you have three other variables. Mediated, which really is about the media that the study looks at. Socialization is the other variable. Big factor. It really helps us to better understand the things about human behavior. So if you look at those two variables particularly, and of course in many of these studies, you'll have these kinds of what I'm calling generally control variables under experience. That's not listed here on page 403, but it is in fact what we're trying to do. The four attitude variables, again, citizens trust, character assessment, service quality, service importance, are your X1 through X3 or X4 variables that are specified in the emails I've sent along to you. Okay, that's probably all I want to say about that. So again, the willingness to pay study looks at a model that's specified on page 403. If you read the model from right to left, willingness to pay is what you're trying to better understand. That's your dependent variable. Again, page 17 of Hagen shows some discussion about that, as well as page 16. Again, the attitudes, going back to the study, citizens trust, character assessments, service quality, and service importance are all X or independent variables. You can certainly look at the other variables that are listed on the page there under experience as predictor variables as well, depending on how the model is specified. Okay, now the other study is about racial and other differences in support of or lack of support for the death penalty. Okay, take a look at page 1289 of that particular study on the death penalty. What you will find is a table 1, which is a list of variables. Those are X type variables. This study on the racial divide and the death penalty shows 19 X or independent variables and only one Y or dependent variable, basically called support for capital punishment or the death penalty. The model shown on page 1289 would be specified as follows. Support for the death or capital punishment is a function of race, in this case African American, and then you have 15 socioeconomic variables that include age, education, religiosity, whether one is politically conservative or not, the trust for government, and the like. You can read that list on page 1289. At the bottom of the study are 3 additional variables that are measures of racism. Those variables, as you see at the bottom of the page, focus on Jim Crow, symbolic, and white racism. Well, there you are. That's the entire model. That model is attempting to predict and explain the attitudes, basically, or the support for the death penalty. Okay, in your study you will be attempting to create models that have dependent and independent variables, like those on page 17 that I just mentioned to you, and of course the public safety model, like that found on page 403. Hopefully this gives you a better sense of what I'm trying to do in helping you to understand how to set up these models. Look, for a number of you, this is a new process. Okay, I'm certainly available to continue to help you to move through this and become successful. I think again Hagen on pages 16 and 17 really does a pretty good job of introducing some of these concepts to you. Your models will certainly need to specify these both dependent and independent variables as you go. Hopefully my words reflect some knowledge that will help you become mightier than a strong man. Proverbs 24:5 is probably useful here. It says, a wise man is mightier than a strong man, and a man of knowledge is more powerful than a strong man. Hopefully we've gotten some additional insights today. Again, drop me an email if you have other questions. Thanks so much.